Hello everyone, and welcome to the Geography at Lincoln interview with Dan Magnone. We hope this session will really be useful in answering questions you may have, but please feel free to put any comments and questions in the comment boxes to the side. So firstly, hello Dan, thank you for joining us tonight, and we can't wait to hear a little bit more about geography. So firstly, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at the university?
Well, thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you Sophie for hosting today. I'm Dan Magnone, and I'm the program leader for physical geography. That's the BSc pathway in our geography degree here at Lincoln. I'm a senior lecturer, so I teach and I do research, and I teach a fair few of the core modules within our degree here at Lincoln.
Great. So how did you become interested in geography and the environment in the first place?
Well, I think really many of the key challenges of our age are geographical, and whether that's from climate change and how we tackle that and what the causes of climate change are, through to food security. They're all geographical problems, and actually, if you look at the if you look at the current pandemic that we're living through, yes, it's a health crisis, but it's also at its heart got some very important geographical parameters in there. That's why we've got urban areas that are more heavily affected than rural areas. That's why we've got a north-south divide in this country, and so there's most of the crises and challenges that are facing modern society are actually intrinsically linked to geography. So I think it's that link to the problems, but also the diverse nature of what you can study within geography.
Yeah, I definitely like how up to date it is. So can you tell us a little bit about your current research and what you specialize in?
Yeah, so I do well, lots of different things really, but one aspect of my research is looking at food security. So that's how we provide enough food for people moving into the future. And this might sound slightly strange since I'm a physical geographer, but actually food comes from soil, whether or not you're eating meat. The only food that doesn't come from soil is seafood, and that for most people makes up a minor part of the diet. So I look at how we use resources, and a lot of people don't know this, but we use finite resources to grow many of our crops, and some of those present environmental challenges on top of that. So how do we meet the challenge of growing populations and food security with the natural resources we have? And then at the same time, in a very similar way, I look at our water resources and how climate change might affect them, but also how our impact on the environment, whether that's pumping out groundwater or polluting rivers, will affect what we call ecosystem services and will affect the sustainability of society and humanity moving into the future.
Yeah, sounds really interesting. So can you tell us a little bit about the opportunities for students to get involved with in research at the uni?
Well, as you well know, Sophie, we've got a very strong ethos here of getting students involved in research. So, like many universities, we do dissertations in the final year, and this is really, for many people, this will be your first foray into research. And we've got some master students this year who used to be undergraduates who've got the research bug and they've stayed on. But they're also, one of the things I think we're very good at doing is getting you in at a much earlier age. And you in particular, you went out and did a project on microplastics in our local environment, and that was an excellent piece of work that you did. And that was through a bursary scheme. Perhaps you could mention a bit about that.
Yes, so it was kind of an application process where you had to put forward an idea, and the central university team had to obviously decide which ones were worth the funding for the research, and then you get a period of 4 weeks where you had to obviously conduct the research and prove like all what you were meant to do. And yeah, so as Dan said, we looked into microplastic contamination in the River Witham, to see obviously what the impacts are on like the ecosystems Dan mentioned before. So yeah, it was really interesting as well.
Yeah, and you did very well. You're being far too modest because you won a prize for your work. But it's that getting students in. These are opportunities that are you know, help you develop your understanding of how geography works, of how science works, of how academia works, and it gives you really good opportunities at an early age before you go off and do dissertation work. So yeah, plenty there, and there's lots of good researchers in our school. I think that's one of our real strengths. And so whether you're a human geographer or a physical geographer, there will be somebody there who would be interested in serving, supervising you on a project.
Yeah, it was definitely great how like you can see real world problems in some research. So before students obviously have the opportunity to get involved with research, there's obviously a lot of new things we have to learn going from school to uni. So what are the different options while studying geography at degree level, and what degrees are available at Lincoln?
So we run two main bachelor's degrees. That's the Bachelor's of Arts, which is nominally Human Geography, and the Bachelor of Science, which is the program that falls under my leadership, which is nominally the Physical Geography course. And on top of that, we have some alternative pathways in. So there's what we call the Cert HE. So if you don't quite get the grades you were hoping for, there are other opportunities to get in, but you would need to contact us about that. And then there's also the master's pathways as well. But in terms of our undergraduate degree, the BA and the BSc share a common first year. So if you come to Lincoln, you will be studying alongside your BA colleagues if you're a BSc student, and alongside your BSc colleagues if you're a BA student. And the importance of that is that we see geography as this unified subject, and it's the unity of geography that we are trying to get across. So I mentioned a whole range of things earlier on that got me interested in geography, and they're not just physical and they're not just human problems. They are linked. So climate change is an anthropogenic driven problem. So you have to understand the human context and the physical, because the effects are physical. And likewise, the COVID pandemic is how people move, but there are certain underlying causes that can also relate to certain aspects of why the disease flares up in certain places. So there's a lot to study in geography, and that first year is saying, well, human geographers need to have a working knowledge of physical geography and vice versa. So I teach a course called Environmental Data Monitoring and Analysis, and that's very laboratory heavy, and we go and do a lot of field work and we do lab work. And then we've got courses like a GIS course where students will be introduced to geographical information software, and this is something that underpins a lot of modern geography. So there's some quite core skills-based modules, and then there are concept-based modules. So this year we introduced a module called People, Places. There's 4 P's and I forget all of them, but it's about people and place, and that sense of identity. And then on the physical geography side, we've got an introductory to geomorphological processes and sedimentological processes. So there's these 2 ideas that are bringing in key concepts, whilst which you will then need and use as you go forward in your degree. And it's then at your second year and going into your third year even more so that you start to specialize with a number of optional modules. And so you don't have to choose at 18 whether you want to be a human or physical geographer, but as you develop through your degree, we will start to encourage you to become the geographer that you want to be. And it's not about forcing that upon you, but it's about helping you find your own identity as a geographer.
Yeah, I definitely found that really good when I was like obviously applying to Lincoln. I really liked how we had the common first year, because despite now specializing in a lot of physical subjects, I still enjoyed learning about those different processes. And I also really enjoyed the field work and all the kind of lab work and practical side of geography, which is obviously why I've kind of specialised a bit more now. But also GIS, like you mentioned, was something I never really knew about before. So that was great to learn about.
And we sometimes find that some students will swap. Some students who come in thinking I'm really very much a human geographer, I'm really very much a physical geographer, and then they suddenly realise that actually there's a whole different side to this subject that you don't get at A-level, and so they change over. And some students don't. Some come in and stick to what they wanted to do. And I've always found with my modules, it's all when I crunch the data at the end of the course, I don't see a difference between the physical geographers and the human geographers in how well they do. I tend to see them do equally well, despite mine being a very physical module in the first year.
Yeah, no, I think everyone I've spoken to have really enjoyed both sides of it, which is obviously really, really good to hear. So coming off of that, what are some of the strengths of geography at Lincoln?
I think the common first year is definitely a strength of our degree. It means that it means that we don't force you into that decision as you join us. There are other strengths as well. So we've got some really good local field sites, and we make good use of them throughout the degree. And we've got some in the past we've done some pretty exciting field trips abroad. So I would say that common first year is a real strength of what we do at Lincoln, and then that research-led teaching that uses the real field sites in our local area is a real strength of what we do here.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So are there any
I was going to ask you anything you particularly enjoyed then in terms of
again, definitely the practical elements and having that common first year, like I said before, because it just helps give you that foundational knowledge before you either choose or you do both. Especially coming from a gap year as well, I found having that common first year and just having everyone around you was really, really useful, because obviously you could just speak to any of you and it was absolutely fine. So yeah, that was definitely good for me.
Yeah, wonderful. That's really good to hear.
Yeah. So are there any practical elements to teaching, and can students undertake work placements while studying?
So yes is the answer to both of those questions. We've got lots of practical courses or courses that have practical elements in, and practical does mean old-fashioned geography of standing in a rainy field, but it also means laboratory work. I think few A-level students realise quite how much laboratory work is in modern geography. Mm-hmm. It means practical human geography. So I know some of the courses go out and just do focus groups or interviewing, and lots of the dissertations of your year group at the moment have got that side of things to them. And in addition to all of those features, we've got the computing side, because all those maps you see, so you will have seen them, the people watching this will have seen them during the pandemic, those maps, those color pleth maps showing the changes in color in terms of how intense the infection rate is in different areas. Those are made with this geographical software. When you see the weather maps, they're all geographical software. So those are the types of things that you will learn to do in a very practical way, and they can be very, very saleable in the marketplace.
Yeah, it's definitely really nice being able to learn different things from your A-level as well. And it's really good to not put into practice kind of what you're taught in the classroom. So going and doing those field work and the different lab work, you can see what you're meant to be doing, and it helps kind of ground the knowledge.
And of course we offer the placements as well, and I don't think you do a placement, Sophie. No. But this is a thing that I found many students really gel with. They tend to be in the local with a local organisation, so we like them to be walkable or public transport from the university, but it's something that often students sort of makes the degree click for certain students, where they see, I'm working with the ambulance service. This is why it's worth learning about these spatial problems, because the ambulance service use them, and that was one example that we've had. I think we've had them with the Environment Agency before, but I'm not entirely. I couldn't be exactly quoted on that. But all sorts of local employers will hold a placement for our students, and there's options to do that in the second and in the third year, and if you want it in a sandwich year as well.
Yeah, I think from what I've heard as well, people have really enjoyed it, and like you say, it's helped them realise what you can do and what it means to do geography. So you kind of touched on the field trips, but do students get to go on any exciting field trips while studying geography?
So our first big residential field trip, we have a number of residential field trips, but the first main residential one is relatively local. It's about sustainability in Lincolnshire, and we do that at the coasts, looking at flooding in that area, and we do it in the farming area. So Lincolnshire has some of the most important agricultural land in the country, and we go down and have a look at some of that. But it also has some flooding problems, so we look at some of that, and it also has coastal problems because the land is so low lying, and then on top of that, we've got issues around tourism and issues around deprivation in coastal areas, and we look at those in the first year field trip in South Lincolnshire. In the past, although not this year because of COVID, we have gone to Crete, and that's where students have looked at things like landslides, but also how the landscape has shaped human society on the island of Crete. And then we do or in the past, and we again haven't been able to run it this year, but we've done a field trip to Chile. The first two are core, and they are through your tuition fees. The Chile field trip is optional, and it's an additional there's an additional cost associated with that. But we go to Chile and we look at things like glaciers. We look at how places in a very different part of the world have developed, and we look at that interplay between people and their environments. So yes, so there's three very exciting big residential field trips, and we also do these sort of smaller day trips in the local area to local sites, often that researchers are active in, and so we have very good knowledge of some of these sites.
Yeah, I enjoyed Butlins, but unfortunately I wasn't able to go to the other two because of coronavirus, but yeah, hopefully I'll be able to go to the places eventually.
Yeah, you've been very unfortunate in the timing of COVID for you.
Yeah. So looking on to like the future past the degree, what kind of career prospects are opened up to students who study geography? And can you tell us about any career paths former students have taken?
So we've got a number of different pathways. So a lot of our students have gone on to teacher training, and we've had a fair few students take that pathway. I've known a student who has ended up working for one of the major banks in this country. So it's quite a diverse pathway in which you can go down. And elsewhere, we've only had one cohort of graduates come through, so there's not a lot of data to go off. We've had a student who's gone on to, but one of those graduates has gone on to do a PhD, fully funded at another university, and that's a big success. So hopefully he'll have a glittering research career ahead of him. And then more widely, geographers go into all sorts of interesting places. Many of our I've known geographers who have been employed by the big supermarket chains in head office, because if you want to know where to put the next store, that is in some ways a geographical problem. As I say, we have placements in the ambulance service, and they were very impressed by what our geographers do. So there's all sorts of pathways. And then there's what you might expect geographers to do more of, which are things like the Environment Agency and those sorts of paths as well.
Yeah, and I particularly found, obviously the geography department, also the uni as a whole, really supportive when looking at my career options. So like I say, I'm going on to teach training.
Yeah.
But things that the uni run, like the Lincoln Award, has really helped to like boost your different skills, and also a CV service which they run can help you just refine those little bits that you think, oh, maybe isn't quite up to standard.
And have you made use of the career service, Sophie, at Lincoln?
Yeah, so I've completed the Lincoln Award, and I've also done some of their workshops, and got them to look over my CV and cover letter to make sure they're good, and then done a few of their like career clinics, so you can go and have a chat to one of the supervisors to see where you can take your next steps to make sure you get where you want to be effectively.
Yes, yeah, and I know that all the other pathway that students take is to do go into further education, and that's a very popular route as well, whether with us or with other universities. I've known them going to both places.
Yeah, and I think overall, like looking back on my past 3 years, it's been really good. Like I really don't want to leave, but I know I'm going to have to at some point. But it's been like really supportive, and like just get a well-rounded knowledge that I didn't think I would actually get. Like sit in my A levels, I was like, oh, there's no way I'd learn some of these things that I'm actually learning. But yeah, it's been really good.
Have you found geography to be different to what you thought it was?
Yes, it's definitely a lot different. Like I didn't think, never did I think I'd be studying microplastics or looking at like the way rivers actually form in depth and like the different like units they form, like pools and riffles. But like when you study it at school, it's a bit more this happens, but uni is definitely more in depth, and it's a lot more you can specialize in what you're interested in, which is something that was really interesting.
Excellent. It's really good to hear.
Yeah, so I think that's all our questions for today. So thank you, Dan, for answering all the questions. And if anyone else has any questions, please come along to our open day on Wednesday to find out more. But in the meantime, I'm available on UniBuddy if you do have any further questions. Awesome. Thank you.
Sophie, thank you very much for listening, everyone.